Can big data predict the future accurately? Chapter 1. The Map of Tomorrow. If you put your ear to the world, you can hear it hum. It's the sound of turbines in a data center, of packets flickering across oceans, of cameras blinking and sensors ticking, and phones whispering the coordinates of our lives. Someone, somewhere, is watching this hum and saying, with enough data, the future is a solvable equation. It's a tempting sentence, clean, powerful, deliciously inevitable. But is it true? Can big data predict the future accurately? Let's begin with a story. Imagine a cartographer in an age of fog. She carries no ink, no compass, only a backpack of sightings. A fisherman who saw a gull fly south, a lighthouse that winked twice at midnight, a tide stain on a pier. Each is a fragment, a little truth, a point. When she has enough of them, she draws a coastline. To sailors, the coastline looks like prophecy. Sail here, avoid there. But to the cartographer, it's something humbler, a map stitched from many small, imperfect reports. Big data is the art of collecting millions, billions of such points. Your heart rate on a watch, a truck's GPS ping, clicks on headlines, purchase histories, electric meter squiggles, a thermostat's gentle adjustments as evening cools. Every point is a whisper. Together, they make a murmur. And if you listen skillfully, you can sometimes hear tomorrow inside it. Sometimes it is honest to begin with where big data already does well, because the answer to our question is not a grand yes or no, but a careful it depends. If the future you want to predict is the kind that behaves like yesterday, repeating rhythms, stable cause and effect, slow drift, then big data can be startlingly precise. Think of short-term weather. The atmosphere obeys physics, our sensors are dense, and our models have matured for decades. A forecast for tomorrow's rain in your neighborhood is often accurate, not because big data is magic, but because the world, in that narrow band, is reasonably civilized, bounded, instrumented, and familiar. Or consider package delivery. The logistics web is choreographed by data, estimates of traffic, driver behavior, fuel prices, customer habits. The result is not a definite prophecy, your parcel will arrive at exactly 4:17 p.m., but a tight window that often holds true. Electricity demand, another example. Past consumption, holidays, weather, industrial schedules, all sit neatly in a model that gives grid operators a credible tomorrow. In these domains, the key is structure. The system is measured well. The rules don't change violently. The relevant variables are observed. Error is small and, crucially, knowable. The cartographer has countless sightings and a coastline that, despite some wobbles, doesn't rearrange itself overnight. But then there are the seas where the shore moves. Here's where we must be honest about the limits. Human behavior, markets under stress, politics, cultural shifts, novel diseases, one-off disasters. These are futures that resist being trapped in yesterday's net. It's not that data cannot help. It's that the map of tomorrow is drawn on a table someone keeps bumping. Feedback loops, incentives, strategic behavior, contagion of ideas. The act of predicting changes the thing being predicted. Traders front-run the forecast. Voters react to polls. Patients change habits after seeing risk scores. The coastline not only moves, it moves because we publish the map. To ask if big data can predict the future accurately is to ask a tangle of sub-questions. Accurately for whom? Over what time horizon? Under what stability of the world's rules? With what cost of being wrong? And quietly, necessary, what is the moral price of collecting the data required? Let's pull on each strand. I Accuracy is not a single number. We talk about accuracy as if it were a monolith. In truth, it is a family of measures. For a hospital predicting readmissions, missing a high-risk patient, a false negative, is worse than flagging a low-risk one, a false positive. The cost of inaction can be a life. For a music platform predicting songs you'll like, the reverse might be fine. It's cheap to be wrong. In hurricane forecasting, the cone of uncertainty is ritualized, not a point prediction, but a corridor. In supply chains, a mean absolute percentage error can be accurate on average, while hiding disasters for specific products. So when someone asks, can big data predict the future accurately? The first honest answer is, define accurate. If you mean often enough to be useful, yes, if you choose the right domain, use the right metric, and accept that useful includes uncertainty. If you mean pinpoint, almost never, outside the clockwork corners of the world, Eke. Yesterday's signal is tomorrow's temptation. A model eats history and spits out future. But history is laced with traps, biases, blind spots, survivorship. If past loan approvals favored certain neighborhoods because of unfair policy, a predictive credit model trained on that past will institutionalize the bias, calling it risk. If past hiring skewed toward a narrow profile, tomorrow's algorithm will call that profile fit. Big data does not automatically wash history clean. It often amplifies its stains. Accurate in reproducing the past can be inaccurate in aligning with the future we want to build. Accuracy is not innocence. A precise forecast that preserves injustice is a failure of purpose. The future isn't merely to be predicted, it is to be chosen. We must decide whether our models learn the world as it was or the world as it should be. EII. Correlation is an alluring liar. Give me enough variables and I can find a pattern. Somewhere in the millions of columns and rows, shoe size will correlate with willingness to tip or carrot purchases with punctuality. In a high-dimensional universe, coincidence is plentiful. A model can perform spectacularly on the data it was fed, only to crumble when faced with a slightly different tomorrow. We call this overfitting, mistaking noise for law. The remedy regularization, cross-validation, discipline feels technical. The implication is philosophical. We must be humble about what the pattern really means. Causality is the North Star. A causal relationship is sturdier across time, more portable into new circumstances. But causality is hard to earn, and big data's brute force can tempt us to skip the slow work of explanation. The world then punishes us. We predict flu from search terms until the search terms change. We predict demand from clicks until the interface changes how people click. The coastline in our head was actually a cloud. IV. The world drifts. Modelers call it non-stationarity. The statistical properties change. People move to the suburbs. A viral app tweaks everyone's attention. A law caps prices. A supply shock ripples. Your model has memorized a music that no longer plays. In such moments, can big data predict the future accurately? Becomes, can big data keep up? This is not a purely technical race. It is organizational. Do we have a way to notice drift, to retrain swiftly, to revisit assumptions, or do we keep sailing with an old map and blame the rocks for being misplaced? V. Goodhart's law and the mirror that cracks. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Make time on site your prized metric, and you'll get a web designed to capture attention at any cost. Doom scrolling as a business model. Predictive policing sends patrols where past arrests were concentrated. More patrols produce more stops, which produce more data, which steer more patrols back to the same neighborhoods. The model becomes not a window but a mirror, reflecting and deepening its own bias. The future, it turns out, is easy to predict if you are manufacturing it. The lesson is unsettling and crucial. We cannot treat predictions as passive facts. They are interventions. Their accuracy should be judged not only by proximity to an outcome, but by the consequences of being made. Cease. The thick fog of black swans. A black swan is an event that sits outside what our models deemed plausible, either because we did not imagine it or because we quietly assigned it negligible probability. By their nature, black swans defeat forecasting. Unprecedented shocks yield unprecedented errors. The defense is not to pretend we can foresee the unforeseeable. It is to adopt posture, building systems that bend. We don't ask a model to never be wrong. We ask a world to survive when it is. Here, big data's gift is not prophecy but resilience. Early warning signals, tiny tremors in supply chains, odd spikes in clinical symptoms, subtle changes in mobility can alert us that today is not like yesterday. A model that detects regime change is often more valuable than one that extends yesterday's line. 7. Privacy and the ethics of seeing. There is a darker question braided into our main one. How far should we go to make predictions accurate? The marginal gain from more data often comes from intimacy. Your late-night searches, your location minute by minute, your casual chats scraped for sentiment. The map sharpens as the gaze deepens. But we are not only data points. We are persons. Consent matters. Dignity matters. A future predicted at the cost of our inner lives is a future that forgot what it was for. 8. Interpretability and trust. People accept forecasts for planes and pacemakers because we trust the engineering. But the deeper some modern models grow millions, billions of parameters, the more they resemble oracles. Powerful, opaque, sometimes brittle. Accuracy without intelligibility produces a fragile authority. We believe until a failure shatters belief. In domains with heavy consequence, medicine, law, finance, interpretability is not cosmetic. It is the foundation of legitimate use. We need not understand every weight, but we must understand enough. Why the model says what it says, where it is confident, where it is weak, what data fed it, which demographics it serves poorly. IX. Time horizon. Tomorrow is kinder than next year. In general, the nearer the future, the better the prediction. Short horizons benefit from inertia. Signals hold their shape. As your gaze lengthens, the world has time to surprise you. Big data shines in micro forecasts. The next 10 minutes of traffic, the next 4 hours of demand, the next day's load on a server. Ask it for a decade and you will hear a cough. The fog is thick, the coastline amorphous, the tides not yet known. There is wisdom here. Use the right tool at the right range. Stitch micro forecasts into adaptable plans, rather than rely on a single grand prophecy. X. The craft behind the claims. Strip away the marketing and you will find a craft at the center, framing the question precisely, choosing the right loss function, curating the training data, mitigating bias, designing for drift, stress testing under counterfactuals, quantifying uncertainty. The success of big data is not a function of size alone. More is not automatically better. Cleaner is better. More representative is better. More aligned with the use case is better. The glamorous words, AI, machine learning, deep distract from the carpenter's virtues, attention, skepticism, iteration. Let's walk through a few living rooms of prediction to see these truths in furniture and dust. Health. Hospitals now predict which patients are at risk of sepsis hours earlier than before. The models drink vital signs, lab results, notes. Where they succeed, teams made 3 sober moves. First, they defined accurate clinically, not just an AUC on a test set, but lives saved and false alarms low enough that nurses listen. Second, they built feedback loops. When the model fired, a rapid response team investigated and labeled the alert as helpful or noise, improving the model. Third, they tracked equity. Did the model work across ages, genders, races? This is not just statistics, it is justice. Where such discipline existed, yes, big data predicted a sliver of the future accurately enough to change it. Retail and demand forecasting. The best systems don't cling to a single model. They assemble an ensemble and let the data choose which model to trust at which time. Winter weekends behave differently than summer weekdays. They integrate external signals, local events, promotions, weather, but they also accept humility. Instead of chasing the impossible accuracy for every item store pair, they triage. Focus human attention on the small set of products where errors cost most. They use prediction intervals, not points, and they plan inventory that can flex when wrong. Accuracy here includes strategy for error. Finance. Markets are adversarial. As soon as a pattern is widely used, it is arbitraged away. Models must account for transaction costs, liquidity, and crowding. What looks profitable in backtests evaporates in the live arena. The better question is often not, can we predict price X? But can we predict how a simple, transparent heuristic will behave under stress? Risk management becomes the centerpiece. Drawdowns, tail events, correlations in crisis. Big data is less a crystal ball than a radar. It sees motion, but the storm may still veer. Public health mobility during pandemics. Aggregated mobile location data can estimate how interventions change movement. It does not predict the virus itself, but informs models that do, showing where contact rates might rise. Ethical programs aggregate and anonymize, limiting granularity and implementing governance. The result is not a precise prophecy, cases will be exactly Y on date Z, but a range with leading indicators that, when used prudently, likely save lives. Again, the lesson. Accuracy as guidance, not as omniscience. Energy. Wind and solar forecasting marry physics with machine learning. Turbine telemetry, weather reanalyses, satellite images together, they produce credible hour-ahead and day-ahead forecasts. This is a triumph of instrumentation and hybrid modeling, yet operators still keep reserves. A stack of flexibility for when clouds ignore the script. Accuracy lives inside contingency. Now, let me pivot from the rooms to the foundation. If our question is whether big data can predict the future accurately, the honest foundation looks like this. A. The future comes in types. Type 1. Repeating, constrained, well-measured systems. Examples: short-term weather, logistics, micro-horizons, power load tomorrow morning. Here, big data can be impressively accurate within defined bounds. Type 2. Complex, adaptive, human-centered systems. Examples: elections months out, stock markets under stress, cultural trends, geopolitical shocks. Here, big data helps construct scenarios, probabilities, and early warnings. But accurate prediction, in a point sense, is rare and often illusory. B. The purpose of prediction is decision, not spectacle. An accurate enough forecast is one that improves a choice when weighed with its cost, its fairness, and its risk. If a forecast is 80% accurate, but the 20% is catastrophic and undetected, we must revise what accurate means in practice. C. Uncertainty is not a bug, it's the story. Good systems present confidence intervals, alternative scenarios, and stress test results. They show you where they are blind. They expose the assumptions they stand on. They treat prediction as a conversation with reality, not a decree. D. Forecasts change the future they predict. We must evaluate models in the presence of their downstream effects. Resource allocation shifts. Incentives mutate. People adapt. Accurate only makes sense when we measure after the world has reacted to the forecast's existence. E. Ethics sets the walls of the room. The accuracy we are willing to chase is bounded by the respect we owe to privacy, consent, and justice. We could predict better if we surveilled more is not a neutral sentence. It is a choice about what kind of society we are. I want to offer an image to keep us company. Picture a gardener with a weather app and a barometer, seeds and soil tests, a calendar, and a memory of last spring's frost. She does not need perfect foresight to grow a good garden. She needs decent forecasts, resilience in design, and habits that learn. She builds raised beds that drain well in sudden rains. She staggers plantings to hedge against a cold snap. She watches the sky even as she trusts the app. Prediction is part of her craft, not its tyrant. The harvest, when it comes, is not proof that the forecast was flawless. It is proof that the system was wise. In that spirit, let's return to our cartographer. With each tide stain and lighthouse blink, her map grows truer. But she also sketches in pencil. She leaves room for the coast to shift. She adds notes in the margins. Rocks may have moved after the storm. Fisherman's tale, possibly exaggerated. New sandbar reported by 2 ships. The sailors who use her map do not worship it. They respect it, and they bring along a lead line and a sense of the wind. So, can big data predict the future accurately? It can predict pieces of it, often enough to be profoundly useful if we choose our domains carefully, measure accuracy in ways that fit the stakes, refuse to copy yesterday's injustices into tomorrow, and design our lives and institutions to be graceful when the map and it will get something wrong. Big data is less an oracle than an instrument. In the hands of careful people, it makes us more anticipatory, more prepared, more alive to faint signals that tomorrow has already started. But if we expect certainty, we will build brittle empires. If we conflate correlation with cause, we will make the future hostage to ghosts in the data. If we ignore the feedback loops we create, our predictions will harden into self-fulfilling cages. Accuracy, then, is a virtue nested inside others. Humility, transparency, equity, and the courage to act on less than perfect knowledge while keeping room to revise. The truth is not tidy, but it is empowering. We do not need to know the future perfectly to shape it responsibly. In the next chapter, we will get even more practical. We will build a field guide, 12 principles for using big data to peer into tomorrow without deceiving ourselves. How to frame your prediction problem, how to quantify uncertainty credibly, how to audit bias, how to survive regime shifts, how to measure the value of being right enough, and how to decide when the cost of more accuracy isn't worth the ethical or economic price. We will move from philosophy to practice, from the coastline to the harbor, and we will end where all good prediction must. With choices we can make today that make tomorrow better, even if it refuses to be fully known. Chapter 2. The Field Guide to Responsible Foresight. The philosopher's answer is comfort. The engineer's answer is a plan. This chapter is the plan. We're going to build a field guide, 12 practical principles for using big data to look ahead without lying to ourselves. Each principle comes with a story, a checklist, and a trap to avoid. Think of these not as laws etched in stone, but as habits of attention. Together they make a discipline. Separately, they are small lights you can carry into rooms where the future is negotiated: boardrooms, clinics, city halls, design reviews at midnight, war rooms when the graph turns strange. Before we begin, a brief reminder. The goal of prediction is better decisions, not better press releases. A sharp forecast that changes nothing is trivia. A modest forecast that changes a life is triumph. I frame the decision, not the data. Story. A city transit agency wanted to predict bus delays. The data science team began extracting GPS histories, traffic feeds, weather. Weeks in, a planner asked a naive question. If we knew the delay, what would we do? Silence. A different framing emerged. Which segments are consistently late enough that riders abandon the system, and which schedule changes or signal priorities could keep wait times under 10 minutes? Suddenly, the target was not forecast error, but rider experience, and the action was redesign, not dashboard. Checklist. Write the decision you want to improve in one sentence. Write the action that will change when the forecast crosses a threshold. Write the cost of false positives and false negatives in actual units, hours, dollars, lives, trust. Define the horizon where action is still possible. Trap. Framing to impress rather than to intervene. A problem statement that makes you look clever is usually too abstract to help. 2. Choose a loss function you'd defend in public. Story. An online grocer optimized demand forecasts using mean absolute percentage error, MAPE. On average, beautiful. In reality, a few staple items with huge stockouts were destroying customer trust. MAPE had downweighted the very items where the business bled. The fix was political and statistical, a custom loss that penalized underforecasting on essentials far more than overforecasting on novelty products, plus a constraint that stockouts on a curated list would count double. Checklist. Translate accuracy into a loss function aligned with consequences. Weight the loss for critical subgroups or critical SKUs. Run what would we have done differently? Audits on past decisions using your loss. Present both the headline metric and the worst-case metric. For example, 95th percentile loss. Trap. Optimizing what's easy to measure instead of what matters. The metric becomes a moat that keeps ethics out. Clean less, understand more. Story. At a hospital, messy vital sign streams were being aggressively smoothed, imputed, and clipped before modeling. A clinician noticed that the very rare flatlines, followed by rebounds, often signaled sensor displacement or patient agitation, which itself predicted deterioration. The new policy was to preserve raw quirks and create features that captured the signature of artifact and agitation, then model both physiology and context. Checklist. Keep a raw, read-only copy of data. Never throw it away. Build first-pass models on raw features to see what breaks. Create features about data quality itself. Missingness, variance spikes, timing gaps. Pair with a domain expert and ask, what looks like noise to us but is signal to you? Trap. Treating cleaning as janitorial work rather than epistemology. Every deletion is a choice about the world. IV. Make uncertainty a first-class citizen. Story. A wind farm operator once received a point forecast, 30 megawatts at 2 p.m., and scheduled maintenance. A surprise lull forced a scramble. They switched to prediction intervals, for example, P10 equals 22 megawatts, P50 equals 30 megawatts, P90 equals 38 megawatts, and built rules only schedule maintenance when the whole interval sits above a threshold and carry reserves when the interval widens. Checklist. Report intervals 50% and 90% next to every point estimate. Calibrate. If you say 90%, are you right about 9 times in 10? Track resolution, how narrow, and reliability, how honest, separately. Decide actions on intervals, not points. Trap. Hiding uncertainty because it confuses stakeholders. Uncertainty hidden is chaos invited. V. Hunt for drift before it hunts you. Story. A retailer launched curbside pickup. Overnight, item substitution patterns shifted. The demand model, trained on pre-programmed behaviors, went blind. The team created a canary dashboard, population stability index, PSI, on key features, daily Kolmogorov-Smirnov tests on distributions, and a simple rolling back test against last week. Drift alerts triggered automatic retraining and a human review. Checklist. Monitor feature distributions and prediction error daily, weekly. Set drift thresholds and response playbooks. Keep a shadow model trained on the last K weeks to benchmark. Budget time for postmortems when drift occurs. Trap. Confusing model freshness with model fitness. Retraining can entrench bias or amplify noise if the world is turbulent. V. Prefer causality when you can, respect correlation when you must. Story. A bank found that customers who downloaded the mobile app were less likely to churn. Marketing pushed app banners harder. Churn didn't fall. A causal study later showed that low-churn customers were already more likely to seek the app. The app itself didn't cause retention. The bank pivoted. Instead of app downloads, they ran randomized trials on proactive service calls for at-risk segments, expensive but causal and effective. Checklist. Ask, if we push on this lever, do we expect the world to move? Ifrit. Use quasi-experimental designs, diff and diff, instrumental variables, regression discontinuity. When RCTs are impossible, separate predictive models. Who, from causal policies, what works. Document causal assumptions explicitly. List plausible confounders. Trap. Shiny uplift charts that are nothing but selection bias in disguise. 7. Beware Goodhart's law. Design with second-order effects. Story. A content platform optimized for watch time. Creators stretched videos, added cliffhangers, and manipulated thumbnails. Engagement rose, user satisfaction fell. The platform redefined success as a weighted blend watch time, like ratio, skip rate, would recommend to a friend, and long-term retention then capped exposure gains from any single metric to dampen gaming. Checklist. List how people might game your metric if money or fame were at stake. Use multiple, partially independent metrics with safeguards against extreme optimization. Simulate policy effects with agent-based models or A/B tests that look beyond the short term. Revisit metrics quarterly. Retire those that become targets. Trap. Building a ruler and then mistaking it for a republic. VI. Audit fairness as if legitimacy depends on it because it does. Story. An insurer's risk model underpriced safe drivers in rural areas, and overpriced safe drivers in dense cities due to proxies for location and socioeconomics. A fairness audit split performance by geography, age, and income proxies. The team added constraints to equalize error rates across groups and removed proxies that had no causal path to risk. Checklist. Define fairness for your context, equal opportunity, calibration within groups, bounded disparate impact. Evaluate performance by subgroup, show plots, not just numbers. Implement pre-processing, reweighting, in-processing, fairness-aware training, or post-processing threshold adjustments as needed. Involve stakeholders affected by the model in the audit. Trap. Declaring, "We don't use protected attributes," and assuming you're clean. Proxies are plentiful. Intent is not protection. IX. Build feedback loops that learn, not loops that lock. Story. A city used predictions to allocate building inspectors. More inspections led to more violations found in targeted neighborhoods, which fed the model, which sent more inspectors back. To break the loop, the city added exploration random inspections across zones and reweighted data by inspection intensity, not just violations. The model learned where risk truly lay. Checklist. Add exploration to exploitation, multi-armed bandits, randomized auditing. Log exposure, how often and where the model looked. Reweight outcomes by exposure to correct for sampling bias. Periodically reset or cold start on a representative sample. Trap. Confusing more data with more truth. You may just be amplifying your own gaze. X. Make interpretability useful, not performative. Story. A credit model explained denials with "score too low," a legal minimum that helped no one. The team introduced reason codes tied to actionable factors. High credit utilization relative to income or short account history. Consider adding a secured card. They used global feature importance to craft policy and local explanations, SHAP values, to craft guidance. Complaints fell. Approvals for truly qualified applicants rose. Checklist. Provide global and local explanations that map to actions. Validate explanations with domain experts. Ban nonsense attributions. Use model-agnostic tools, permutation, partial dependence, and model-specific ones when helpful. Test whether explanations change user behavior for the better. Trap. Shipping pretty waterfall charts that mislead more than they reveal. XI. Engineer for graceful failure. Story. A hospital sepsis model suffered a server outage at 3 a.m. A lighting panel design ensured safe degradation. If the model was silent, nurses fell back to a simpler rules engine, vitals plus lactate, and the pager system enforced manual checks every 30 minutes for flagged patients from the last 6 hours. The model returned. Nobody died. Checklist. Define safe defaults when the model is wrong, missing, or slow. Add circuit breakers. Stop recommendations when inputs drift beyond known ranges. Keep human in the loop for high-stakes decisions. Train humans on what to do when the model fails. Run chaos drills. Pull the plug in simulations and see what breaks. Trap. Treating AI as a single point of failure and calling it progress. Devil H. Govern the life cycle. Prediction is a product, not a project. Story. A telecom company had 7 churn models, each built by a different team, all unmaintained. Predictions contradicted each other, and no one could say which was in production. They formed a model council, cataloged models, standardized documentation, data lineage, assumptions, risks, and set retirement criteria. Most importantly, they created a last responsible moment rule. No model goes live without a named owner, an escalation path, and a quarterly review. Checklist. Keep a register. Owner, purpose, data sources, last retrain date, performance, risks, sunset date. Write model cards and data sheets. Keep them current. Decide in advance how you'll decommission a model or roll back a version. Tie incentives to outcomes and safety, not launch velocity. Trap. Thinking governance is bureaucracy rather than memory. Without it, your organization forgets how it decided to see the future. The 12 in practice. 3 mini playbooks. A hospital readmission risk. Goal. Reduce avoidable 30-day readmissions. Playbook. Frame decision. Which discharge plans trigger a nurse follow-up within 72 hours? Loss function. Heavily weight false negatives for high-risk patients, but cap alert volume per nurse. Data. Preserve raw timestamps and note structures. Include social determinants where consented. Uncertainty. Send high risk plus high confidence to bedside nurse. Medium risk plus low confidence to case manager for review. Drift. Monitor by department. Cardiology is not equal to oncology. Causality. Run RCTs on post-discharge calls to estimate effect sizes. Goodhart. Prohibit using declined call as a success metric. Measure 30-day outcomes, not contact rates. Fairness. Check performance by language, age, insurance type. Adjust thresholds if necessary. Feedback. Clinicians provide labels, useful, not useful. Use them to refine. Interpretability. Provide top 3 modifiable factors per patient. Failure. If model down, trigger rule-based screening. Governance. Quarterly review. Sunset if no incremental benefit for 2 cycles. Retail promotions forecast. Goal. Predict lift from a weekend promotion. Playbook. Decision. How much inventory to stage per store, per SKU. Loss. Asymmetric shortage penalties is greater than overstock penalties for perishables. Data. Keep POS raw. Treat price display changes as features. Uncertainty. Allocate base stock to P50, buffer up to P80 for high-margin items. Drift. Watch for change in payment mix, signals, macro shifts. Causality. Use test, control stores, synthetic controls if randomization limited. Goodhart. Limit total promo slots to prevent cannibalization. Measure net lift, not gross sales. Fairness. Ensure smaller neighborhoods aren't deprioritized by a blind algorithm. Feedback. Post-event reconciliation within 48 hours. Roll lessons into next cycle. Interpretability. Weather plus payday plus sports event as explicit drivers in briefs. Failure. Default to historical average lift if models disagree beyond a tolerance band. Governance. 1 owner per category. Promotion council signs off. City road safety. Goal. Predict high-risk intersections for interventions. Playbook. Decision. Where to deploy temporary traffic calming and enforcement. Loss. Weight by injury severity. Fatalities count tenfold. Data. Retain near-miss reports, phone accelerometer spikes, and citizen complaints. Uncertainty. Prioritize locations where both model risk and confidence are high. Pair low-confidence hotspots with rapid field audits. Drift. Monitor seasonal effects, graduation, and festival weekends matter. Causality. Stagger installation of speed humps to estimate impact. Goodhart. Don't measure success only by citations. Track collisions and speed distributions. Fairness. Ensure interventions aren't clustered only in neighborhoods with louder voices. Feedback. Police and residents annotate false alarms. Add as training data. Interpretability. Publish simple risk factors on public dashboards. Failure. If model offline, rotate weekly through top historical sites. Governance. Annual review. Retire model if manual targeting consistently outperforms. Patterns of failure and how to escape them. The mirage of more data. Symptom. Teams pile in new sources with marginal value, raising privacy risk and technical debt. Escape. Run value of information experiments. Add one source at a time. Quantify lift. If lift is less than cost plus risk, say no. The backtest delusion. Symptom. Stunning historical performance that vaporizes in production. Escape. Time split validation, realistic transaction and latency costs, and pre-registration of hypotheses. The oracular slide deck. Symptom. Predictions presented as fate, decisions hidden as best practices. Escape. Make the decision tree explicit. Show thresholds. Show alternate actions under alternate scenarios. The ethical afterthought. Symptom. A fairness review 1 week before launch, with nothing left to change. Escape. Bake ethics into the loss function, the sampling, and the governance from day zero. The frozen map. Symptom. A model becomes part of the furniture. Nobody remembers how to move it. Escape. Calendarized sunsets. If nobody is willing to defend why it should live, let it die. Tactics for tomorrow morning. Write a 1-page prediction brief. Sections: purpose, decision, horizon, loss, data, uncertainty, bias, risks, drift plan, fallback, owner. Replace 1-point forecast in your organization with a calibrated interval. Track whether decisions improve. Add a drift chart to your daily stand-up. One picture of a key feature distribution this month versus last. Run one small, randomized experiment, anything, to relearn the feeling of causal confidence. Introduce a red team to critique your model's assumptions as if they were adversaries. Create a patient zero checklist. If your model went viral internally, what harms would spread? The human part. No field guide survives contact with reality unless it speaks to emotions as well as numbers. Prediction work is political. It touches power, budgets, pride, and fear. Here are the emotions you will meet and the counter-emotions to carry. Seduction, humility. When the graph looks perfect, ask what would break it. Cynicism, courage. When someone says, "We've tried this before," ask what changed and try again with better guardrails. Impatience, craft. When a leader asks for a model in a week, deliver a prototype with honest limits rather than a fake finish. Shame learning. When the model fails, avoid blame. Conduct a no-fault autopsy. Invite the model to get smarter. Leadership is not the absence of error. It is the presence of revision. A short lexicon for living with uncertainty. Interval. A promise about where the truth often is. Drift. The world's way of reminding you it is alive. Bias. History leaking into tomorrow through a pipe you forgot to cap. Causality. The difference between found together and moved by. Resilience. The art of being wrong safely. Governance. Memory, made procedural. A closing map you can fold. Imagine, once more, the cartographer. Today she walks a beach that yesterday did not exist. New sand thrown up by a storm. She smiles, not because her old map was wrong, but because her method was right. Pencil lines, annotated risks, habits that turn surprise into revision. Sailors still need her. She still needs them. Each voyage returns with notes. Each note becomes a mark. Each mark, a safer passage for the next crew that dares the fog. This, finally, is how big data predicts the future accurately. Not with a single blinding truth, but with an evolving choreography between models, measurements, and minds. Where the world is structured and observed, it gives us sharp tools. Where the world is wild, it gives us honest probabilities and early warnings. In both places, it asks for character humility to show a range, courage to decide within it, discipline to revisit, and a devotion to people that outlasts any metric. Will big data transform foresight? It already has. Will it make us omniscient? It never will. The better question is the one a good sailor asks at dawn. What do I know today that I didn't know yesterday? And how will I steer because of it? If your models can help you answer that cleanly and humanely, you are predicting the future accurately enough. The book ends here where the work begins. Close the covers, open the calendar. Pick one decision tomorrow to nudge with a forecast small, honest, reviewed with someone who knows the field. Put an interval around your confidence. Write down what you expect, what would surprise you, and what you'll do if surprised. Then, when tomorrow arrives as it always does, compare notes, revise the map, and try again. This is not a spell. It is a practice. And practiced long enough, it feels like a kind of wisdom, not knowing the future, but growing worthy of it.